The supply drone came in 3 hours late and sideways, which told me the pass was worse than the forecast said. I watched it fight the crosswind from the relay's south window, a battered compact freighter drone, orange running lights blinking in the dark like something embarrassed, and I went out to meet it in the cold because there was no one else to send. Relay Station Harrow 9 sat at 4,200 meters on the Varath Range's eastern shoulder, and in the 7th month of the season, it was mine alone. The last rotation crew had finished in the 4th month. The replacement crew was due in the 8th. I had volunteered for the gap, which the Compact's logistics division had accepted with the kind of enthusiasm that told me they hadn't expected anyone to say yes. 44 days of sole occupancy at altitude, running the atmospheric monitors, the beacon relays, the twice-daily medical telemetry uplink. Retirement work, my former commander had called it, not unkindly. Work for someone who needed the silence more than the salary. I was 57 years old and I did need the silence. I had needed it for 6 years, since Duvar Station, since the thing that happened there that I am not going to explain in detail because it is not the point of this account, and I have already explained it to 4 review boards, and I am tired of explaining it. The short version is that I had 32 patients and the quarantine grid failed, and I made choices about priority and order, and the math worked out, and 8 of my 32 did not survive, and the math working out does not feel like anything you'd call comfort when you are the one who did the arithmetic. I had my rating stripped. I had it reinstated 2 years later when the board found the grid failure was equipment neglect, not my error. I did not find the reinstatement as meaningful as the board seemed to think I should. So, silence. The mountain. 44 days of reading the gauges and filing the reports and watching the snow come down off the Varath Ridge and not making any decisions about anyone. The drone touched down badly, one landing strut crumpling on the ice shelf and tipped a full 40 degrees before the gyros caught it. I pulled the cargo hatch manually since the cold had seized the mechanism, and I checked the manifest against the crates. Standard rotation supply, dried protein, atmospheric filter cores, 2 replacement beacon modules, medical consumables, fuel cells. 7 crates. The manifest said 7. I counted 8. I stood in the wind and counted again. 8 crates. The 8th was smaller than the rest, unmarked. The seams were sealed with insulation foam, the domestic kind you'd buy at any hardware depot, not compact tissue, not rated for altitude, already cracking in the cold. Someone had done this hastily and not well. I should have left it there. I should have tagged it as anomalous cargo, filed an irregular manifest report, and waited for instructions. That is what the protocol said, and I knew it. I had written parts of that protocol. I opened it. She was curled into the lower third of the crate, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, making herself as small as she could. She had coral-colored skin, the deep rose brown of fired terracotta, and her hair was the white of old bone, matted against her temples. Her ears came to points above the hair, long and translucent at the tips, veined with something faintly luminous. Her eyes, when she opened them and found my face, were amber, large. The kind of eyes that had evolved, or been made by whatever made her species, to take in a great deal of light at once. She looked at me, and she did not move. She was waiting to find out what kind of thing I was. I had been a field medic for 23 years before Duvar Station. I knew shock when I saw it. I knew cold, and I knew fear, and I knew the specific quality of stillness that belongs to a creature that has decided that movement is more dangerous than waiting. I had seen it in adults. I had seen it in soldiers. I had seen it in children, which is where it is hardest to look at. I said in compact standard, which was the only alien dialect I trusted my accent in, "I'm not going to hurt you." She did not answer. She watched me. "I need to get you inside," I said. "The temperature out here will kill you in 20 minutes, probably less the way you're dressed." She was wearing a layered shift that had once been a good quality weave see-throny work, I thought, the kind that regulated body heat, but it was torn at both shoulders and stiff with something I did not immediately identify. The foam insulation around her had been torn and packed over her as bedding. Someone had tried to keep her warm. Someone who was no longer in the crate. I did not think too long about that. Thinking too long about it would not help either of us. I reached into the crate with both hands, open-palmed, moving slowly, the way you approach anything that is afraid of you. I said, "I'm going to lift you out now. Tell me if I'm hurting you." She let me lift her. She did not make a sound. She weighed less than she should have for her size, less than the hollow-boned lightness of her species' standard build, which I had read about but never treated, and when I got her against my chest and felt the heat of her skin through my jacket, I registered that she was running a fever, not a mild one. I carried her inside and the door sealed behind us and the wind was gone, and in the sudden quiet she made her first sound. A long, slow exhale, like something letting go of a held breath it had been holding for a very long time. I put her on the examination table. I pulled the supply crate's access log on my uplink unit and found what I had already half suspected. The drone had been loaded at the Vareth base depot in a 30-minute window when the load supervisor was on shift change. The 8th crate had been inserted into the cargo bay manually. There was no sender code. There was no destination flag. Someone at the depot, or with access to the depot, had put this child in a supply drone and aimed it at the highest, most isolated relay on the range, and I was the only one here to receive her. I did not know the whole of it then. I learned the rest in pieces over the days that followed, some from her and some from the uplink traffic I was not supposed to be reading but read anyway. What I knew in that first hour was, she was small and she was alien and she was sick and she was alone, and I was a medic, however much I had tried to stop being one. I took her temperature. I did a blood oxygen reading. I checked her lymph response along the neck and jaw, which in her species, V3, I was nearly certain now. The coral skin and the amber eyes were the match, runs differently than in humans, the nodes sitting lower and harder. She let me work. She watched my hands. She did not flinch unless I came near her left side, below the ribs, and when I came near that side the third time she said, in compact standards so precise it sounded like a recording, "That is where it is worst." "I know," I said. "I need to understand how bad." Her name, she told me in the same careful standard, was Thessaly. She was young, small, I will say small, which is the honest measure, smaller than any child I had treated, the size of a human child half her species' age. She had been on the drone for 11 hours. Before the drone, she had been in a transit camp at the Vareth base lowlands, one of the compact administered resettlement facilities for displaced V3 families following the border consolidations in the southern ranges. Before the transit camp, she stopped there. She did not finish that sentence that night, and I did not push her. I found the lesion on her left side when I ran the scan. It was not large yet, but it was the right shape, the subdermal bloom, the way the tissue margin looked in the image. The faint bioluminescence the scanner picked up that her species' infection response produced as a byproduct, the same pale amber as her eyes. I sat with that image for a long time. I had seen it in training files, 30 years ago, in a module I had not expected to ever be practically relevant. V3 bloom, that was the colloquial name. The clinical compact designation was subcutaneous bioluminescent pathogen, classification 7, which was a bureaucratic name that told you almost nothing about what it did and everything about the administrative category it had been assigned. Classification 7 meant zoonotic risk. It meant quarantine mandatory. It meant, under Compact Sanitation Protocol 14C, enacted 8 years ago in the aftermath of the Sureth outbreak, that any confirmed case in a non-treatment facility required immediate notification to the nearest Compact Sanitation Division office and mandatory evacuation of the infected individual to a compact containment center for evaluation. The evaluation at a containment center for a V3 child with a Class 7 bloom had a statistical outcome I had looked up once, years ago, in a different context, and had not looked up again because the number was the kind of number you do not look up twice. I sat with all of this for a while. Then I went to my medical cabinet, which held 44 days' worth of solo operator medical supplies plus whatever I had brought beyond standard issue, which, being who I was and having done what I had done for 23 years, was considerably more than standard issue. I had brought my field kit. I had brought the drug synthesizer, which was a compact portable unit the compact had tried to decommission 3 years ago, and which I had purchased out of the decommission inventory because I am the kind of person who does that. I had brought my personal reference archive, which I had spent 6 years building and which contained, among other things, every paper I had written or contributed to on cross-species emergency medicine, and every paper written by others on the same subject in the 40 years I had been reading about it. I had brought specifically, because I had always been thorough, a paper written 18 years ago by a V3 xenobiologist named wholesome, published in the Journal of Cross-Species Pharmacology, Volume 12, on the subject of early-stage intervention protocols for V3 bloom using compounds synthesizable from standard human medical supplies. The paper had never been replicated. It had 3 citations. It had been written before the Surith outbreak, before Classification 7, before the compact had decided that the cleanest solution to a difficult biological problem was administrative removal of the infected individual. It was not a guaranteed protocol. Orphan had written it for early-stage infections, and I did not yet know exactly how early this was. It required precise compound ratios that I would need to calculate fresh for her body mass and species-specific liver processing rates. It required monitoring I could do alone, but only barely. It required 72 hours of continuous treatment. I pulled the paper, I set up the synthesizer, I started the calculations. I did not file the notification required by Protocol 14C. I want to be clear about what that was. It was not a snap decision, not a moment of passion, not the kind of thing that happens in stories where the hero acts on instinct and sorts out the reasoning afterward. I sat with the protocol on one screen and Orphan's paper on another, and I made the choice the way I made all choices. I weighed what I knew and what I did not know, and I looked at the child on the examination table, and I decided. The decision took 11 minutes. I have thought about it every day since. What I knew, the treatment could work. What I did not know, how well. What I knew, the containment center outcome statistics. What I did not know, whether anyone at the base depot would notice the 8th crate was missing or who had put it there or how long I had before they checked. What I knew, there was a blizzard coming down off the Varath Ridge, forecast strength 7, which would close the pass road for at least 4 days and would likely keep the access route to Harrow 9 impassable for longer. What I knew, I was a medic, however much I had tried to stop. I said to Thessaly, who was watching me from the examination table with the same calm amber attention she had given everything since I carried her in, I'm going to try to treat this. It will take 3 days. It will not be comfortable, but I think it can work. She considered this for a moment with a gravity that was not childlike, or rather was a kind of child seriousness I have only ever seen in children who have had to be serious far too young. "Will you tell them I am here?" she said. "Not yet," I said. She nodded once, as if this was the answer she had expected but had needed to hear. The first night was the hardest medically. The bloom's early stage runs hot. The body's own bioluminescent response is the immune system doing what it evolved to do, which is to contain the pathogen within a light-generating cell cluster that limits its spread to adjacent tissue. The fever is part of that process, not incidental to it. Suppressing the fever entirely, as standard human protocol would have done, would have been the wrong call. I kept it managed, held it to a range Orphan had specified as functional, and spent 5 hours watching her temperature and adjusting the synthesis compounds in real time. She slept badly. She woke 3 times. The third time she was disoriented and she called out in a language I didn't have, not compact standard. Something older, V3 native. The kind of language a child uses when they are frightened and small and the careful learned words fall away. I sat on the edge of the cot, and I said her name quietly until she found me with her eyes. "I know," I said. "I know it hurts. You're all right, I've got you." She found my wrist in the dark and she held it. Her fingers were cool by then, the fever breaking slightly in that watch, and her grip was very precise, not clutching, not desperate, just present, making sure I was still there. I stayed there until she slept. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the chair beside the cot and I watched the synthesizer's readout, and I watched her temperature on the monitoring unit, and I listened to the wind building outside, the blizzard's advance edge already pressing at the relay's north face. The gauges on the exterior wall ticked up steadily. I had nowhere to be and nothing to do but this, and for the first time in 6 years that felt like the right description of a night's work. Between monitoring cycles, I thought about Duvar Station. Not for the first time. I had spent years thinking about it, in the mandatory counseling sessions and outside them, but differently. At Duvar Station, I had made the best choices I could in an emergency that was not of my making, with the resources available, and 8 people had died anyway, and the math had worked out. The weight of those 8 had been with me since. What I had understood about that weight slowly over 6 years was that it was not guilt exactly. The review board had said not guilty, and I had come to believe them, eventually, but something more specific. It was the weight of having been, in that particular crisis, the one who held the accounting, the one who looked at the numbers and turned them into action. That is what a medic is. That is the work. And the work has a cost, and the cost is that you carry the accounting afterward, and you carry it alone. What I was doing now was different. There was no failed grid, no system error I was compensating for. There was a child and a choice, and the choice was mine and only mine. I was not compensating for a failure. I was making a decision about what mattered more. The distinction, in the small hours of that first night with the wind outside and Thessaly's hand on my wrist, and the synthesizer cycling steadily, felt important. I could not have said why precisely, except that it was the first time in a long time that the accounting felt clean. The second day the blizzard arrived in full, and the relay's exterior sensors went to wind load alert, and I lost the uplink for 4 hours mid-morning. When it came back, I found 3 automated messages from the Compact Sanitation Division office at Verath Base. A general sweep notice sent to all relay stations in the range regarding an active Class 7 trace in the lowland resettlement camps, a quarantine status update, and a third message that was not automated, a direct query to Harrow 9, addressed to the solo operator, asking whether the most recent supply drone delivery had included any anomalous cargo. I read the 3 messages 4 times. Then I sent a reply to the third message that said, "Delivery confirmed, standard manifest, no anomalies. Uplink intermittent due to storm conditions. Will advise if conditions change." I sent it and I sat with what I had just done, and I thought about Duvar Station, not the way I usually think about it, but differently. The 8 who died at Duvar Station died because the grid failed. I had made the best choices I could with what I had, and the math had worked out as well as it could, and 8 had still died. The question I had been asked, by the review boards and by myself, was whether I had done everything possible. The answer each time was, yes, I had, and it had not been enough. That was the weight I had been carrying for 6 years. This was a different question. This was, what are you willing to do when the choice is entirely yours? I checked the synthesizer. The compound levels were holding. I adjusted the ratio for the midday dose by 0.2%, which was within Oreth-Save's tolerance range. I went to check on Thessaly. She was awake. She had pulled the examination table's blanket around her shoulders, and she was sitting at its edge looking at the relay's south window, which showed nothing but white. The blizzard so dense the mountainside had simply disappeared. She did not look at me when I came in. She said, still watching the white, "She put me in the box at night. She said it would only be cold for a little while. I did not say anything. I sat down in the chair beside the table. She gave me the blanket from our shelter, Thessaly said. The one she slept under. She said I should keep it, and I said she would be cold, and she said she had another one. A pause. She did not have another one. Who was she? My mother's sister, Thessaly said. My mother she was in the southern camp, when they did the sweep, the Class 7 trace in the camps. She said the compact designation with a precision that suggested she had heard it spoken by officials many times. She was taken for evaluation. I kept my face still. Your aunt put you in the crate. She said there was a relay station at the top of the pass. She said the people who ran relay stations were alone and they had medical supplies and they would not call anyone because there was no one to call quickly. A pause then, very quiet. She said if the person there was good, they would help. I was looking at the floor. Your aunt was right about the medical supplies. Are you good? Thessaly said. Not as a challenge. As a genuine question, asked with the same patient gravity she put into everything, as if she had been thinking about it for some time and wanted the honest answer. I thought about it. I'm trying to be, I said. She turned from the window and looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached out one hand, tentative, careful, and put it on top of mine where it rested on the arm of the chair. She did not say anything else. She turned back to the window. Her hand stayed on mine. Outside, the blizzard pressed against the glass, and the mountain was gone. Mid-afternoon of the second day, the uplink came back strong, and a fourth message arrived from Vereth Base. This one was not automated either. It was addressed to me by name, my full name, Merritt Voss, not the station operator designation the automated messages had used, and it was signed by a compact sanitation division supervisor named Holeth Crane. It said that cross-referencing the drone's cargo bay capacity against the confirmed delivery manifest had revealed a discrepancy consistent with an additional crate. It said this discrepancy was being investigated as a possible deliberate insertion event. It said that Harrow 9's solo operator was requested to confirm, under Declaration 9 of the Compact Medical Administrative Code, that no unregistered individuals were present at the station, and that no medical treatments had been administered outside standing protocol. Declaration 9 carried a penalty clause. I knew it well. Filing a false declaration under it was a Category 3 administrative offense, which sat 2 categories below the penalty for failing to file the Protocol 14C notification I had already failed to file. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I looked through the inner door at the examination room, where Thessaly was asleep again, the fever cycling back up in its afternoon peak, her coral skin flushed darker at the cheeks, and the tips of her ears lit from within, the bioluminescence of a body fighting hard and losing ground and fighting again. I typed, no unregistered individuals present at Harrow 9, no out-of-protocol medical treatments administered. I sent it. I will not say it was easy. I will say I have filed false reports before, not many, and not casually, and always in circumstances where the truth would have been used as a weapon against someone who did not deserve to be weaponized. You do a thing enough times and you learn the specific quality of the moment before you do it. The brief clear space where you can still choose otherwise, and then the choice, and then you are past it, and the thing is done, and all that is left is to do it cleanly. I did it cleanly. I filed it and I went back to the synthesizer and I ran the next monitoring cycle. 2 hours later, the uplink chimed with a live request, not a message queue item but a direct connection ping, the kind that meant someone at the other end was waiting for me to answer in real time. The identifier was the Vereth Base Sanitation Division direct line. I checked the synthesizer settings. I checked that the inner door to the examination room was fully closed and that the monitoring feed was routed to my portable unit only. Then I answered. The face on the screen was a man in his 40s, compact standard uniform, the kind of face you see behind administrative desks across the galaxy, not cruel, not kind, simply occupied with the business of compliance. He identified himself as Holeth Crane, Senior Coordinator, Sanitation Division, Verath Base. He said he appreciated my prompt responses to the division's inquiries. He said the cargo bay discrepancy investigation was ongoing, and that the division was tracking several possible insertion vectors, of which Harrow 9 was one of 3 active relay stations in the drone's probable delivery range. He said, "I want to be straightforward with you, Medic Voss. We're not conducting a punitive sweep. We're conducting a welfare inquiry. If there is a child in the category we're looking for at your station, the appropriate response is not concealment. It is facilitated transfer to a proper care environment where the child can receive treatment we are not equipped to provide at a remote relay." He said it the way a man says something he has said many times, with the smooth efficiency of a practiced explanation. I had heard versions of it before, in different offices about different populations, across 23 years of field work. The language always ran the same way. Not punitive, not a sweep, proper care, facilitated transfer. Bureaucratic softeners wrapped around a hard mechanical outcome. I said, "I appreciate the clarification, Coordinator Crane. I can confirm that Harrow 9's current occupancy is sole operator. If the cargo bay investigation identifies Harrow 9 as a confirmed insertion point, I'll cooperate fully with any physical inspection once the road clears." He studied me for a moment. He was looking for something in my face, and I gave him nothing. Not defiance, not nervousness, just the professional blankness of a 57-year-old woman who has sat across from 4 review boards and learned exactly how much expression is appropriate. "The road is estimated to clear by tomorrow morning," he said. "I'm aware," I said. "I've been monitoring the snow reports." Another pause. The insertion event, if confirmed, would be a serious offense. The person or persons who arranged it would face significant administrative and potentially criminal charges. "I understand the gravity," I said. He made a note on something off-screen. He said, "One last question, Medic Voss. In your professional experience, given your field background, if a Class 7 V3 Bloom case were to present at a remote relay, and the attending medic had access to limited but functional synthesizer equipment, would you assess that a treatment attempt would be viable?" The question was careful. It was too careful. He knew or suspected enough to ask it obliquely rather than directly, which told me he had done his research on my background and was probing for confirmation without commitment. It was a skilled administrative move. I recognized it the way you recognize a chess opening, the shape of it, the intent beneath. I said, "In my experience, remote treatment of Class 7 cases in inadequately equipped environments is extremely high risk and carries significant probability of adverse outcome. Protocol 14C's mandatory transfer provision exists precisely because the resources required for reliable treatment are not present at relay stations. I would not characterize an improvised treatment attempt as a viable alternative to proper facility care." Every word of that was technically true. I said it and held his eyes, and he wrote something and said thank you and ended the connection. I sat at the uplink station for a while after the screen went dark. The wind outside was a steady deep note, the kind that settles in for hours. I thought about the careful question he had asked and the careful answer I had given and the fact that he had asked it at all, and I concluded that I had perhaps half a day, possibly less, before the road crews reached the approach, and Holeth Crane arrived to conduct his physical inspection in person. I went back to the synthesizer and ran the monitoring cycle, and then I went to the examination room and I said to Thessaly, who was awake and watching the door as if she had known I was coming, "We have less time than I thought. Tomorrow before dawn." She nodded. She had already understood from the way I had checked the door before answering the uplink that something had changed. She said, "How much time?" "Enough," I said. And then, because she deserved the honest version, barely enough, we'll pack tonight. The second night Thessaly's fever spiked harder than the first night's, which was within Orath Save's predicted range, but only barely. The SAVE protocol described a secondary inflammatory response at the 36 to 44-hour mark, as the pathogen cluster attempted to spread before the compound saturation could contain it. A narrow window in which the treatment was most precarious and the monitoring most critical. I had been watching for it, and I caught it, adjusting the compound ratio upward by a full 0.5% and increasing the monitoring frequency to every 20 minutes. She was awake through most of it, which I think was harder than being unconscious would have been. She lay on the cot, and she breathed carefully, the measured breath of a person who has been told that measured breathing helps and has decided to trust the instruction. I sat beside her and I talked to her, not about anything consequential, about the relay station, about the mountain, about the Verath Range's weather patterns and the way the atmospheric readings changed in the 7th month, and what the gauges looked like when a storm was building. Steady things, things with no weight of their own. She listened. Around the second hour she said, in a voice roughened by the fever, "Tell me about Duvar Station." I was quiet for a moment. "How do you know about Duvar Station?" "I asked the Uplink Station's archive," she said. "Your name is in it." I looked at her. She met my eyes, steady and fever-bright both at once. I said, "When did you do that?" "The first day, when you were recalibrating the synthesizer and I was alone in here." A pause. "I wanted to know who you were." I thought about what the archive would have told her. The review board summaries, the certification stripping, the reinstatement. "What did you find?" "That you made choices," she said. "When the grid failed, that you decided who lived." "Yes." "Did you do the right thing?" I had been asked this question by 4 review boards, 2 counselors, and myself in various configurations for 6 years. I said, "I did the best thing I could with what I had." She considered this. "That is not the same as the right thing." "No," I said, "it isn't, not always. Sometimes the best you can do doesn't feel like enough and you carry it anyway." The relay hummed around us. The wind outside had dropped to a low, consistent howl, the blizzard settling into its long second act. The monitoring unit showed her fever at the upper edge of the tolerable band, holding, not climbing. "My aunt made choices," Thessaly said. "She chose me instead of herself. I do not know if it was the right thing." "Your aunt put you somewhere you could be helped," I said. "That was not a wrong choice." "She is alone at the camp now." I did not answer that. There was no answer that was honest and also kind, and she was not asking for kindness, and she knew it. She was doing what she did, holding the weight of it in both hands, feeling what it cost. After a while she said, "You are alone here." "Yes." "By choice." "Yes." "Because of Duvar Station." "Partly." She was quiet for a moment. The monitoring unit beeped softly, fever at peak, starting to come down. I checked the reading and adjusted nothing. It was moving in the right direction on its own. "I think," Thessaly said carefully, "that you came here to stop being a medic, and you are not able to." I looked at her. She was watching the ceiling with her large amber eyes, thoughtful and exhausted both. "No," I said, "I'm not able to." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, too tired for a laugh, too knowing, and she closed her eyes, and after a while her breathing evened out into sleep, and I sat with the monitoring unit and the synthesizer and the sound of the mountain outside, and I thought about what she had said with the same even-handedness she had applied to everything else. She was right. I had come here to stop. I had not stopped. The third day the blizzard broke. The access road was still closed. The snow report from the Compact's range monitoring system showed 3 meters of new accumulation on the pass, and the maintenance crews would not reach Harrow 9's approach road before the following day at the earliest. I had, at minimum, another 20 hours. I told Thessaly this. I told her in the context of telling her that the treatment was working, which it was. The 60-hour scan showed the bloom fully contained, the tissue margin clean, the bioluminescent response fading as the pathogen's activity dropped. I had been watching that scan image the way a person watches a horizon for a ship. The good kind of ship. The kind that means the calculation worked. She looked at the scan image for a while. She had learned over 3 days what she was looking at. She asked good questions, and I answered them honestly, which is the only way I know how to answer medical questions, and which she responded to with a serious attention that reminded me, in a way that tightened my chest, of the best students I had trained. She said, "It is smaller." "Yes," I said, "it is smaller. By tonight it will be smaller still. By tomorrow morning the pathogen load will be below the detectable threshold. You won't be contagious. You'll need 2 more weeks of the maintenance compound. I'll prepare enough for a month to be safe, but you'll be past the acute phase." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Will you tell them then?" I had been thinking about what I would say when she asked this. I had been thinking about it for 2 days. I said, "I need to tell you some things first, about what I know. Then I need you to help me think about what to do." She nodded. She sat with her feet tucked underneath her on the examination cot and her hands in her lap, and she looked at me with those amber eyes and she waited. I told her what I knew about her mother, which was not enough. Only the statistical realities of the Class 7 evaluation process at compact containment centers, which I reported to her as carefully and honestly as I could, neither softening nor catastrophizing. Her face did not change while I spoke. She was doing the same thing I did when someone gave me information I had not wanted, holding it in both hands to see what it weighed. I told her what I knew about the messages from Verath Base. I told her that someone was looking for her, and that the someone was the Compact Sanitation Division, and that I had been answering their queries with incomplete information. I told her that I had a decision to make, and that it was my decision, not hers, but that she deserved to know what it was and why I was making it. "If I report you now under Protocol 14C, you go to a containment center," I said. "Your bloom will test below threshold by tomorrow, but the protocol doesn't distinguish between active and resolved cases. You'll be evaluated. The evaluation process is—" I stopped. I chose my words. "The evaluation process for a V3 child with a documented Class 7 exposure does not always result in release." She said, "My aunt told me this." "Your aunt was right. What is the other choice?" I had been working on the other choice for 36 hours. I said, "Tomorrow morning, before the road crew reaches the approach, you leave Harrow 9 on foot. The north face of the Verath Range has a descent route. It's not marked, but it's passable after the blizzard, and it comes down into the Oreth lowlands, which are outside compact resettlement jurisdiction. There's a settlement called Verath Nor at the bottom. It's small, mixed species, independent. It's not on any compact administrative map." I had found Verath Nor in a topographical survey database from 11 years ago. It had appeared in one subsequent document, an independent trade registry, and then stopped appearing in anything official, which, in my experience, meant it had either ceased to exist or had gotten very good at not being noticed. I was gambling on the second. "I'll pack you 10 days of supplies, the maintenance compound doses, a map I'll draw tonight." I paused. "It's a day's walk on good ground. In the current snow longer, you'll need to move carefully." "I have moved in snow before," she said. "Not defensive, just informational." "I know." I looked at her. "You're young, it's a hard walk, but I think you can do it." "What happens to you?" she said. I had known she would ask this. I said, "I report the anomalous cargo delivery as discovered this morning, delayed discovery due to storm conditions. I report a child, species undetermined, signs of illness, compact standard speaking, arrived in an unmarked crate. I report that I administered emergency medical care under the Compact's humanitarian provision, Section 3 of the Medical Conduct Code, and that the child was found deceased from the original infection before full treatment could be administered. A pause. I'll need to delete certain files, the treatment logs, the scan images, the synthesizer records. Thessaly stared at me. You will tell them I died. Yes. And then there will be a review, because there is always a review, and I will answer the review as I answer all reviews, which is as honestly as I can while protecting what I have chosen to protect. I met her eyes. I've been through 4 reviews. I am not afraid of reviews. That was not entirely true, but it was true enough. They will not believe you, she said. It was not a challenge. It was the same careful, factual attention she gave everything. They may not. That is a possibility I have considered. You will lose your certification. I lost it once before. I got it back. I paused. Whether I get it back this time is not the most important thing on the table. She looked at me for a long time. I could not read her expression fully. Her species' emotional signaling used muscle groups that did not map to human faces, and I had only 3 days of reading her, but I knew the quality of that long look. She was deciding something. You do not have to do this, she said. I know. My aunt said there might be someone good, she said, at the top of the mountain. Your aunt was an optimist. Something changed in Thessaly's face then, a softening, a small thing at the corners of her mouth and in the set of those large amber eyes. The first time I had seen anything like it in 3 days, she said. She was always an optimist. I drew the map that night. I drew it on the back of a relay maintenance form, which was the heaviest paper stock I had available, and I drew it in wax pencil so it would survive water. I marked the North Face Trail in 2 colors, the confirmed route in blue, the alternate in red in case the confirmed route was blocked by drifting, and I marked the waypoints by physical landmark rather than coordinates, because coordinates required a device and I had not packed her one. I marked Varathnor with a circle and wrote its name in both standard and in the V3 script's approximation. I marked the approximate distances in hours, not kilometers, with notes. This stretch is protected from wind, this one is exposed. Rest here if the light is failing. Do not descend the red route after dark. I had drawn medical evacuation maps before in the field. For patients who had to move themselves out of a situation, I could not extract them from physically. You draw them as a last resort. You draw them as carefully as you can, and you put everything you know onto the paper, and you let the person take it and walk away, and you do not spend too much time thinking about the space between drawing the map and knowing the person arrived. I packed the supplies while Thessaly slept. I prepared 32 doses of the maintenance compound, enough for a month, enough margin that if she lost some in the snow she would still have adequate coverage, and I labeled each dose in compact standard, and in the phonetic approximation of the V3 written script that I reconstructed from Orath Save's paper, where it appeared in the compound names. The reconstruction was imperfect, but the labels were clear enough. I packed a thermal layer from my own kit, my spare, rated for altitude, too large for her but wearable with the drawstrings pulled. I packed protein rations for 10 days and a water purifier and a fire starter and 2 emergency beacons, which I disabled because she could not use an active beacon without being found. I sat with the disabled beacons for a while after I put them in the pack. Then I took one out and re-enabled it and tucked it into a sealed inner pocket of the pack with a note that said, in compact standard, only use in extreme emergency. She was old enough to know what extreme emergency meant. She was old enough to decide. I had spent 3 days watching her decide things, and I trusted her judgment about when to use it. I added one more thing at the end, after the beacons and the rations and the compound doses were all packed. A small sealed envelope, addressed in standard to no name, no address, containing a single folded page with my full name, my medical certification number, and a signed statement that I had personally administered the Orath Save protocol to a V3 patient, case 7A, and that the treatment had been fully effective. Not evidence in any legal sense. I had made sure of that by stripping all identifiers. But a professional attestation, in case it was ever needed, from someone whose name was in the compact's medical registry, even if that registry currently showed a suspension. It was the last thing I had to give her. I put it at the top of the pack where she would find it easily. At 4 in the morning I ran the final scan. The bloom was gone, below threshold, clean margins. The pathogen had been eliminated by the compound protocol and her own immune response working together, the way Orphan had described it. Not the compact's approach, which was to remove the infected individual from the equation and manage the risk from the outside, but the other approach, the one that required trusting the body and the compound and the time and the continuous attention of someone who did not look away. I showed her the scan. She looked at it for a long time. "It is gone," she said. "It is gone." She put her finger on the scan image on the place where the bloom had been. She did not say anything for a moment. Then, "My mother had it here." She touched her own left side below the ribs, mirroring the gesture. "The same place." I did not say anything. "Is that," she stopped, started again. "Could the same treatment?" "The same treatment, yes, if she received it early enough." I kept my voice even, kept it in the register of information, not of comfort, because comfort was not what she was asking for. If she is at the evaluation center, her infection status will be a matter of record. If her case is comparable to yours early stage, there is an argument to be made. To the right person with the right documentation. I went to the relay's uplink station. I transferred a copy of the Orphan paper to a portable data chip, one of the small ones used for equipment firmware updates. I added my own case notes from Thessaly's treatment, not under her name, not under any name, logged only as Case 7A with species designation VAETHRI subtype 2, and all identifying information removed. I added the synthesizer logs for the compound ratios. I wrapped the chip in a piece of thermal insulation, and I put it in the inner pocket of the pack, beside the disabled beacon. "There are people who deal in this kind of information," I said. "Researchers, advocacy organizations working the border consolidation cases. If you get to Varath Nor, ask for someone who works with displaced V3 families. Show them the chip." She looked at the pack. She looked at me. "I don't know if it will work," I said. "I want to be honest with you. I don't know if it will reach anyone in time. I don't know if your mother's case is comparable or if it has already been." I stopped. "I don't know." "But it might," she said. "It might." She was quiet for a long time. The relay hummed around us. Outside, the mountain was still dark, the pre-dawn cold holding everything in suspension. In 2 hours, light would come up over the Varath Ridge and it would be time. She reached into the pack. She took out the water canteen I had packed, a standard compact tissue unit, gunmetal gray, unremarkable, and she looked at it for a moment and then she held it out to me, and when I took it she held on for a moment before letting go, as if she were transferring something that went beyond the object. Then she pressed both hands over mine briefly, the way she had done the first night, precise and present, the grip of a person who needs you to know they are still there. "Take care of yourself," she said, in compact standard, with the formal register she used when she was saying something important. I put the canteen back in the pack. I sealed it. I helped her with the thermal layers drawstrings. I stood at the relay's north face access door and I watched her check the map one more time, folding it exactly, tucking it into the inner chest pocket. She adjusted the pack's shoulder straps. She did them twice, the second time tighter, the way you adjust for a long carry. She stopped in the doorway. She turned back to look at me. The early light was beginning at the ridge, not full dawn yet, a gray-blue suggestion at the horizon, and it caught the tips of her translucent ears and made them glow faintly, the pale amber of something almost healed. She had been hiding from the moment I found her, from the moment before that, inside the crate, inside her careful standard, Inside the stillness she had built to survive an environment that wanted to process her. She had been hiding for a long time, I thought. Longer than 3 days. Longer than the time in the crate. She looked at me, and she was not hiding. That was what I have thought about since. Not any of the rest of it. Not the review, not the certification, not the months that followed. Just that. The way she looked at me in the doorway in the gray-blue light with nothing between us. Then she turned and she walked out into the snow, and I watched her until she reached the north face trail marker and began the descent, and the mountain took her. I came back inside. I sat down at the uplink station. I deleted the files I had said I would delete, the treatment logs, the scan images, the synthesizer records, the full version of the records. I kept one copy, encrypted on a personal data chip separate from the one I had given her, not for the review board, not for any official purpose, but because it was a treatment protocol that worked, and I was a medic and someday someone else might need it. Then I composed the report. It took me an hour to write. Not because I did not know what it would say, but because I wrote it 4 times, checking each time that it would survive scrutiny, that the timeline was consistent with the storm conditions, that the terminology was accurate, that the medical language supported the stated cause of death, that nothing in it pointed to the North Face Trail. The 4th version was the one I sent. The review board convened 40 days later at the compact Regional Medical Authority office in the Lowland Basin. 3 reviewers. 2 of them I had encountered through the professional literature. One of them had cited the devarstation decision in a paper on field medic protocol prioritization, approvingly, which I had found both gratifying and difficult to receive gracefully. I answered their questions for 2.5 days. I answered them as honestly as I could while protecting what I had chosen to protect. The storm conditions, I said, had delayed my discovery of the anomalous cargo. The child had been in severe distress on discovery. I had administered emergency medical care under Section 3. She had not survived to full treatment completion. Did I file the required protocol 14C notification? I had not, I said, because Section 3 of the Medical Conduct Code authorized a medic to prioritize emergency treatment over administrative notification when the patient's immediate survival required it, and I had judged the child's immediate survival to require it. The reviewer who had cited my devarstation work looked at me for a long moment after I said that. She was a small woman, compact standard build, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that had been skeptical for so long it had set that way. She said, "That is a narrow reading of Section 3. "It is the reading I applied," I said. She made a note. She looked at me for another moment, the way someone looks at a statement they intend to verify, and then she moved on to the next question. They stripped my certification for 18 months on the grounds of procedural failure, the delayed notification, and referred the case to the Compact Sanitation Division for a separate review of whether the child's death was preventable given earlier notification. I submitted to that review as well. The Sanitation Division review concluded that given the bloom stage and the remote location, earlier notification would not have materially altered the outcome. I received the certification reinstatement letter 14 months later at the forwarding address I had given them, which was a post box at a communications relay in the Oreth Lowlands. I had moved there after the first review, for reasons I told anyone who asked were about proximity to the mountain range and the air quality at altitude. Vereth Nur was a 4-hour walk from where I had settled. I had walked it 3 times on 3 different days before I allowed myself to do it a 4th time. The 4th time, a year and 7 months after the morning on the mountain, I walked into the settlement's central market area, low stone buildings, open-air stalls, the mixed-species bustle of a small community that has been deliberately not noticed for a long time, and I found the V3 Family Advocacy Organization that operated out of a building on the east side, identified by a small painted sign in 3 scripts. I gave them my name. I said I had a medical background and experience with Class 7 cases in the field. I said I was interested in contributing to their documentation work. The woman behind the counter, young, coral-skinned, amber-eyed, white-haired, wearing a practical work jacket with the sleeves pushed up, looked at me for a long moment. She said in compact standard, "I know who you are." I said I thought you might. She came around the counter. She was taller than I remembered, which was not surprising. It had been almost 2 years. She moved with a sureness she had not had in the relay station, the sureness of a person who has found their ground and is standing on it. She stopped in front of me and she looked at me with those large amber eyes and she said, very quietly, "She's here. My mother, she's here." I did not say anything for a moment. I had not let myself expect that. I had sent the chip and not let myself expect anything, because expectation in my experience is the enemy of the clean decision. You make the decision and you let it go. You do not wait on it. "The documentation you sent," Thessaly said. "The ORF save paper, the case notes. We found an advocate who took the case to the regional medical board. The bloom stage at evaluation had been logged incorrectly, filed as late stage when the intake scan clearly showed early stage, which the advocate argued was either error or misrepresentation, and the board agreed it was worth investigating. She was released for independent evaluation. The SAVE protocol," she stopped, steadied. "The SAVE protocol worked for her too." She reached out and took my hand. Both hands around mine, the way a person holds something they have thought about for a long time. "You told them I was dead," she said. "Yes." "Was that," she said very carefully, "the truth?" I thought about this for a moment. The mountain, the North Face Trail, the gray-blue light at the ridge and the glow at the tips of her ears, and the way she had looked at me in the doorway with nothing between us. "No," I said, "that was not the truth. That was what I needed to say." She nodded. She did not release my hand. "Will you stay?" she said. "There is work here, the documentation, the cases. There are others." I looked around the small room, the files, the reference materials, the other workers moving between the stalls, the business of a community that had decided not to be found by the people who wanted to find it. I looked at Thessaly, who had walked a day through the snow at altitude, alone and small and sick, and come out the other side of it and turned around and started working. "Yes," I said, "I'll stay." She released my hand. She went back around the counter. She pulled a file from a stack and set it in front of me, and she said, in the practical tone of someone who has a great deal of work and not enough hours, "Then start here. This case is from the 4th month. The bloom was late stage at intake, but there are inconsistencies in the scan record that I think you'll recognize." I pulled up a chair. I opened the file. Outside, the Vereth Range was visible on the horizon, the long white ridge, the shouldered mass of it, the particular peak under which Harrow 9 sat invisible at 4,200 meters. I had not been back. I did not need to go back. Everything that had happened there was in its right place. I put my eyes on the file, and I began to read.